Not all men are created equal. It was a harsh, immutable truth of the world, one that Izuku Midoriya was supposed to learn at the tender age of 4 in a sterile, white-tiled pediatrician's office. The air in the clinic smelled sharply of rubbing alcohol and old magazines. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a low, agonizing hum that seemed to sync perfectly with the nervous drumming of Izuku's small, red-sneakered feet against the examination table. His mother, Inko, sat in the chair beside him, her hands wrung together in her lap. She offered her son a strained, hopeful smile. Izuku didn't notice the strain. In his hands he tightly gripped his prized all-might action figure, his wide, emerald eyes fixed intently on the bald, mustache-sporting doctor sitting across the room. Dr. Tsubasa sighed, adjusting his round goggles. He pulled an X-ray down from the light board, the stark black and white image of a child's foot glaring back at them. "You should probably give it up," the doctor said, his voice carrying the blunt, careless weight of a man who delivered life-shattering news before his morning coffee. Inko flinched as if struck. "Give it up? You mean, he's quirkless," the doctor confirmed, tapping the screen with a pen. "You see this double joint in the pinky toe? It's an evolutionary relic. When quirks first began manifesting, research showed that those with the power represented the next stage of human evolution, lacking this joint. Izuku here has it. He's as baseline human as they come. There's no quirk coming, Mrs. Midoriya." The world seemed to stop spinning. Izuku's grip on his all-might figure loosened, the plastic toy slipping from his small fingers to clatter against the linoleum floor. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. "No quirk?" The words echoed in Izuku's mind, hollow and cold. "No fire like Dad? No floating like Mom? No super strength like All Might? Just nothing?" Tears pricked the corners of his large eyes. His bottom lip trembled. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to hold back the sob that was building in his chest. As he inhaled, a tiny speck of dust, dislodged from the ceiling vents by the humming lights, drifted down and landed squarely on the bridge of his freckled nose. Izuku's nose twitched. The sob caught in his throat, replaced by a sudden, intense tickle. He closed his eyes tightly. He inhaled again. "Ah!" Inko reached out, her heart breaking for her son. "Izuku, baby, I'm so sore." "Chew!" Izuku sneezed. It was not a normal sneeze. It was not the cute, high-pitched squeak of a 4-year-old boy. It was a concussive blast of displaced air that rattled the glass jars of cotton swabs on the counter. But the sound was only the beginning. The moment the sneeze ripped from his lungs, a searing, emerald-green light erupted from Izuku's body. The light was blinding, accompanied by the horrific, sickening sound of expanding bone and tearing fabric. Inko screamed, shielding her eyes. Dr. Tsubasa fell backward out of his rolling chair, scrambling against the wall as a shadow rapidly engulfed the examination room. Izuku's small, 4-year-old frame didn't just grow, it exploded in mass. His soft, pale skin instantly hardened, erupting into thick, interlocking scales of deep forest green and charcoal black. His legs snapped backward, restructuring into massive, digitigrade pillars of muscle and bone tipped with 3 scythe-like talons that gouged instantly through the linoleum floor. His face elongated, his jaw jutting forward, expanding, unhinging, as rows of serrated, banana-sized teeth tore through his gums. His arms shrank slightly in proportion to his body, pulling tight against his chest, ending in razor-sharp, 2-fingered claws. And behind him, a massive, muscular tail whipped outward with the force of a wrecking ball. Crash! The tail smashed through the clinic's drywall, severing a water pipe and sending a shower of sparks from the destroyed electrical wiring. The examination table crumpled beneath the sheer, terrifying weight of the beast that now occupied the center of the room. Where a 4-year-old boy had sat a fraction of a second ago, there was now a juvenile Tyrannosaurus Rex. Even as a child-aged manifestation of the quirk, the creature was monstrous, nearly 10 feet tall and 20 feet from snout to the tip of its heavy tail. It was crammed into the tiny examination room, its broad, scaled back scraping against the acoustic ceiling tiles. The beast blinked its eyes. They were no longer the soft, round eyes of a little boy, but the piercing, golden, slit-pupiled eyes of an apex predator. Izuku looked down. The world looked incredibly small. He could smell everything, the copper of the exposed wires, the salt in his mother's sweat, the absolute, paralyzing pheromones of terror radiating from the doctor. He didn't understand what had happened. He just knew he was uncomfortable, the room was too small, and his all-might figure was somewhere on the floor. Izuku leaned his massive, terrifying head forward, parting his jaws to ask his mother what was going on. What came out was not a question. It was a guttural, bone-rattling, low-frequency rumble that vibrated through the chests of everyone in the building. It was a sound that belonged to the Cretaceous period, a sound that triggered the deepest, most primal fear responses in the mammalian brain. Rorulair! Dr. Tsubasa fainted on the spot. Inko Midoriya, operating purely on maternal instinct overriding millions of years of evolutionary terror, slowly reached up a trembling hand. Izuku? She whispered. The massive T-Rex tilted its head like a confused puppy, letting out a soft, chirping grunt. It nudged Inko's hand with its scaly snout, careful not to let its terrifying teeth anywhere near her. Inko swallowed hard, looking at the destroyed clinic, the unconscious doctor, and her terrifying, dinosaur-shaped son. Well, she squeaked, her voice bordering on hysterical. I suppose, the X-ray was wrong. The social landscape of a superhuman society is a fragile, complicated thing. When 80% of the population possesses a quirk, extraordinary becomes the new ordinary. A man who can stretch his fingers into keys is a locksmith. A woman who can generate a mild electric current charges cell phones on the subway. But despite this widespread normalization of the abnormal, there existed an unspoken, deeply ingrained hierarchy of quirks. At the top were the emitters. Flashy, clean, heroic. Fire, ice, gravity manipulation, energy blasts. These were the quirks that looked good on television, the quirks that won you merchandise deals and a spot in the hero billboard chart top 10. In the middle were the mild mutants and transformation types. A person with dog ears, a girl with pink skin, a man who could turn his skin into steel. Acceptable. Palatable. At the very bottom, buried under layers of societal apprehension and unspoken prejudice, were the villainous quirks. The monsters. The beasts. The powers that evoked primal fear. Blood manipulation, brainwashing, grotesque physical mutations, and massive, predatory transformations. Izuku Midoriya did not just have a transformation quirk. He had a quirk that turned him into history's most famous, apex murder machine. The official quirk registry classified it simply, Tyrant King. The days and weeks following the clinic incident were a whirlwind of apologies, insurance claims, and terrified neighbors. Izuku quickly learned how to revert to his human form. It required taking a deep breath and focusing on the concept of shrinking, accompanied by a blinding flash of green light and a massive rush of steam. But the damage to his social life was already done. It happened on the playground, 3 weeks after his quirk manifested. Izuku, in his normal human form, was kneeling in the sandbox. He was happily building a castle, though his thoughts were racing a mile a minute. He had a quirk. He wasn't useless. He could be a hero like All Might. He just had to figure out how a T-Rex could save people. Maybe he could carry them on his back. Or use his tail to block falling debris? Hey, Deku! Izuku looked up. Standing over him, flanked by 2 lackeys, was Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki had recently manifested his own quirk, Explosion. It was loud, flashy, and inherently violent. The perfect quirk for a top-tier hero. The adults had been praising him for weeks. I heard you finally got a quirk, Katsuki sneered, crossing his arms. Little pops of caramel-scented explosions crackled in his palms. My mom said you destroyed a doctor's office. You're just a clumsy idiot, Deku. What is it? Does it make you cry louder? The other boys laughed. Izuku stood up, brushing the sand off his shorts. He felt a swell of pride. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel completely inferior to Kaken. I am not an idiot, Kaken, Izuku stuttered, though he held his ground. My quirk is really strong. I can show you. Huh? Prove it, loser. Katsuki challenged, stepping forward aggressively. Izuku closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He didn't want to destroy the playground, so he tried to only transform a little bit. He focused on the feeling of his quirk, pulling the heavy, ancient power from his chest. Flash. Green steam billowed over the sandbox. The kids coughed, waving the smoke away. When the steam cleared, Katsuki's arrogant smirk vanished. Standing before them was not little Izuku Midoriya. It was a juvenile T-Rex, crouched low to the ground. Izuku hadn't managed a partial transformation. He had just transformed into a slightly smaller, more compact version of his full form. Even crouched, he was terrifying. His dark green scales gleamed in the afternoon sun. His massive jaws parted, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth, and a low, rumbling growl vibrated in his throat. The two lackeys didn't even scream. They just turned and bolted, crying for their mothers. Katsuki stood frozen. For the first time in his short, praised life, Katsuki Bakugo felt something he had never experienced before. Absolute, paralyzing prey-drive terror. His instincts screamed at him to run. The towering reptilian eyes staring down at him triggered a genetic memory millions of years old, the memory of being hunted. Katsuki's breath hitched. His heart hammered in his chest. His hands trembled, the tiny explosions fizzling out into useless smoke. He was looking at a monster that could bite him in half without a second thought. Izuku, inside the mind of the beast, didn't see the terror. He just saw his friend. He let out a happy, chirping roar and stepped forward, lowering his massive, terrifying head to nuzzle Katsuki's shoulder in a friendly greeting. The moment the cold, scaly snout touched Katsuki, the blonde boy's fear snapped. It violently inverted, morphing instantly into explosive, defensive rage. "Get away from me!" Katsuki shrieked. He threw his hands up, unleashing the largest explosion he could muster directly into the T-Rex's face. Boom! The force of the blast was negligible against Izuku's armored scales, but the loud noise and the sudden flash of fire startled the primal instincts within the Quirk. Izuku stumbled back, letting out a frightened, high-pitched screech. The massive dinosaur cowered, curling its heavy tail around its legs and covering its snout with its tiny, two-fingered claws, trembling like a frightened puppy. Katsuki stood panting, staring at the cowering behemoth. The fear in his chest was still there, hot and humiliating, but looking at the monster hiding from him, Katsuki's ego viciously reasserted itself. He's huge. He's a monster. But he's weak. Katsuki thought, his fists clenching. He could crush me, but he's too much of a coward. You dumb lizard! Katsuki yelled, his voice cracking slightly. You think you're tough because you're big? You're just a gross, ugly monster. You'll never be a hero looking like that. Heroes don't look like villains. With that, Katsuki turned and ran off, leaving the playground. The green steam enveloped the sandbox once more. When it cleared, little Izuku was sitting in the sand, crying softly, rubbing his soot-stained nose. Katsuki's words had cut deeper than any explosion. Heroes don't look like villains. 10 years passed. The world kept spinning, heroes kept fighting villains, and Izuku Midoriya kept growing. Unfortunately for his mother's grocery budget, so did his Quirk. At age 14, Izuku was a boy of contradictions. In his human form, he was utterly unassuming. He was scrawny, standing at a remarkably average height, with a mop of unruly green hair and a face dusted with freckles. He hunched his shoulders when he walked, a defense mechanism developed from years of trying to make himself look as small and non-threatening as possible. But hidden beneath his skin was a titan. His Quirk, Tyrant King, had scaled with his age. If he were to fully transform now, he would stand nearly 18 feet tall at the hip and stretch 40 feet from snout to tail. He would weigh roughly 8 tons. He was a living, breathing extinction event. Because of this, Izuku lived his life in a state of constant, terrified restraint. His bedroom was a testament to his unique obsession. While other teenagers had posters of pop stars, Izuku's walls were covered in a chaotic mix of All Might merchandise and intricate, hand-drawn anatomical diagrams of theropod dinosaurs. Stacked on his desk were his legendary notebooks, hero analysis for the future. But alongside entries analyzing Mount Lady's gigantification limits and Kamui Wood's tensile strength, there were volumes dedicated entirely to himself. Notebook number 11, Theropod Biomechanics Urban Rescue Adaptations. Izuku sat at his desk, furiously scribbling in the margins of a page detailing the estimated bite force of a Tyrannosaurus. Bite force exceeds 8,000 pounds per square inch, Izuku muttered under his breath, his pencil flying across the paper. Too lethal for combat against human villains. Risk of accidental dismemberment is 98%. Must completely avoid using jaws in combat. Tail sweeps are safer, but the sheer mass, estimated 1.5 tons of pure muscle, would shatter bones on impact. To act as a hero, I have to rely on intimidation, containment, and structural support. I can use the broad back to shield civilians from falling debris. I can use the roar to disorient villains. He stopped writing, chewing nervously on the end of his pencil. The analytical side of his brain was brilliant. He knew exactly how to utilize his monstrous form for good. But the societal reality was a completely different beast. He remembered the time a purse snatcher had run past him in the market. Izuku, then 12, had instinctively triggered a partial transformation, morphing his left arm into a massive, scaly, two-fingered claw to trip the thief. He had stopped the crime, but the woman whose purse he had saved had taken one look at his reptilian, clawed appendage, shrieked in terror, and fainted. The police had arrived and nearly arrested him on the assumption that he was a mutant-type villain terrorizing the area. Society didn't want a T-Rex saving them. They wanted All Might. They wanted a smiling man with perfect hair and a reassuring voice, not a roaring, cold-blooded apex predator. Izuku! Breakfast is ready. His mother called from the kitchen. Coming, Mom! Izuku closed his notebook, stretched, and headed down the hall. The Midoriya household had adapted to Izuku's quirk out of sheer necessity. The doorways had been widened. The chairs in the dining room were reinforced with steel brackets, just in case Izuku sneezed or got startled and accidentally triggered a partial shift. But the most significant adaptation was the food. Maintaining the biological potential to spontaneously generate 8 tons of reptilian muscle required a terrifying amount of energy. Izuku's metabolism was a black hole. Inko stood at the stove, transferring food onto a platter that was normally reserved for Thanksgiving turkeys. Here you go, sweetie, she smiled tiredly. On the table sat 12 scrambled eggs, an entire loaf of toast, 4 chicken breasts, and a large bowl of rice. This was just breakfast. Thanks, Mom, Izuku said, digging in with the ferocity of a starving man. Despite the massive caloric intake, Izuku's human body never gained an ounce of fat. Every calorie was immediately converted into latent energy, stored within the strange interdimensional quirk space that housed his T-Rex mass. Did you double-check your backpack? You have your quirk suppressants? Inko asked, pouring herself a modest cup of coffee. Izuku nodded, swallowing a massive bite of chicken. Yeah. I have the inhaler. When Izuku hit puberty, the feral instincts of his quirk had begun to leak into his human mind. Anger made him want to bite. Fear made him want to roar. The doctors had prescribed a mild, fast-acting inhaler that temporarily numbed his quirk factor, helping him keep the beast locked in its cage during moments of high stress. Good, Inko sighed. Just keep your head down today, Izuku. You know how the teachers get. Izuku's shoulders slumped slightly. I know. Aldera Junior High was a battleground, and Izuku was the designated punching bag. It was a strange dynamic. Most bullies targeted the weak, the small, the defenseless. Izuku was none of those things. If he wanted to, he could transform and flatten the entire school building in less than 10 seconds. But everyone knew he wouldn't. Izuku was too kind, too gentle, too terrified of his own power to ever use it against another person. And teenagers, sensing this absolute pacifism, took cruel advantage of it. It was a twisted power trip for them, mocking the monster because they knew the monster was too nice to bite back. Izuku sat at his desk, his knees crammed against the wood. He was trying to make himself as inconspicuous as possible, while the homeroom teacher droned on about career aptitude tests. You're all third years now, the teacher said, slapping a stack of papers onto his podium. It's time to start thinking seriously about your futures. I would hand out these career aptitude tests, but... The teacher paused, a cruel smirk crossing his face. He grabbed the stack of papers and threw them into the air like confetti. Why bother? I know you all want to go to the hero track. The classroom erupted in cheers. Students began showing off their quirks, stretching fingers, glowing horns, small bursts of water. Izuku kept his head down, gripping his pencil tightly. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher sighed. But remember the rules. No quirk usage in school. Oh, speaking of the hero track. Bakugo, you're aiming for Yui High School, aren't you? The room fell dead silent. Yui was the pinnacle of hero education. The acceptance rate was abysmally low. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet kicked up on his desk, an arrogant scowl plastered across his face. He was lean, muscular, and practically radiated aggressive confidence. Don't lump me in with these background characters, Katsuki scoffed, a few pops of explosions crackling in his palms. They'd be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. I'm the only one here who has the stuff for Yui. I aced all the mock tests. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the top hero, and my name will be carved into the highest tax bracket in the world. Ah, yes, the teacher said, adjusting his glasses. Midoriya, you wanted to go to Yui too, right? The silence that followed was agonizing. Izuku froze, his heart dropping into his stomach. Why? Why did the teacher have to say that? For a second, nobody moved. Then, the entire class burst into uproarious, mocking laughter. Midoriya? No way! What's he gonna do, turn into Godzilla and accidentally crush the hostages? He can't even fit through a normal doorway if he transforms. How's he gonna do urban rescue? The villain alliance wouldn't even have to fight him, they'd just hire animal control. Izuku shrank down in his seat, his face burning red. He stared at his notebook, the words blurring as tears pricked his eyes. I can do it, he thought desperately. I've figured out the math. I can use partial transformations. I can be a hero. Smash! Katsuki's palms slammed onto Izuku's desk, an explosion detonating directly on the wood. The force shattered the desk, sending Izuku tumbling backward out of his chair onto the floor. The classroom fell silent again. Izuku coughed, waving the acrid, caramel-scented smoke away from his face. He looked up. Katsuki was standing over him, his red eyes burning with a furious, complex hatred. Listen up, Deku, Katsuki snarled, his voice low and dangerous. You're worse than the quirkless. You have a power, sure. A flashy, monstrous power. But it's a villain's power. You're a walking disaster waiting to happen. You think they'd let a brainless lizard into UA? You'd step on the people you're trying to save. Izuku scrambled backward until his back hit the classroom wall. That's not true, Kaken. I've been practicing. I can control it. I don't have to go full size, I can. Shut up! Katsuki roared, kicking Izuku's notebook across the floor. It hit the wall, the scorched pages fluttering open. You're a coward who hides behind an ugly quirk. You don't have the heart of a hero. If you really want to be a hero so bad, do us all a favor and go extinct. The bell rang, cutting the tension like a knife. Class dismissed, the teacher said, completely ignoring Katsuki's blatant assault. The students filed out, whispering and snickering. Katsuki shot Izuku one last glare of utter contempt before shoving his hands into his pockets and walking out. Izuku sat alone on the floor of the empty classroom. Slowly, he crawled over to his scorched notebook. He picked it up, brushing the soot off the cover. Hero Anatomy Theropod Biomechanics for the Future. He hugged the notebook to his chest. Deep down, beneath his anxiety, beneath the fear of his own power, a low, rumbling vibration echoed in his chest. It was the primal aspect of his quirk, the ancient predator, reacting to the disrespect. It wanted to lash out. It wanted to hunt the loud blonde boy who smelled like burnt sugar. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, pulling his inhaler from his pocket and taking a deep puff. The chemical coolant washed over his lungs, numbing the feral instinct. No, Izuku whispered to himself, his voice trembling but determined. I'm not a monster. I'm a hero. The next morning, Izuku was running late. He had stayed up until 3 a.m. refining his notes on how to modulate his weight distribution during a rescue. As a result, he had slept through his alarm. He inhaled 8 fried eggs and half a loaf of bread in record time, kissed his mother on the cheek, and bolted out the door of their apartment complex. Crap, crap, crap! Izuku muttered, sprinting down the sidewalk. His green hair whipped in the wind. He checked his phone. The train to Aldera was delayed due to a villain incident 2 stations down. If he waited for the train, he would be 20 minutes late, and his homeroom teacher would absolutely give him detention. Izuku stopped at a crosswalk, panting. He looked at the dense, sprawling concrete jungle of Muzidafa City. He looked at the towering apartment buildings, the narrow alleyways, the network of fire escapes and rooftops. A crazy idea formed in his head. I can't go full size. It's illegal to use quirks in public, and I'd cause a traffic jam, Izuku thought, his mind racing. But if I stick to the rooftops out of sight, I can use a partial shift, just the legs and the tail. For mobility, it was risky. But the thrill of actually using his quirk, of letting the beast out just a fraction, was intoxicating. Izuku ducked into a narrow, deserted alleyway between two towering office buildings. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He didn't want the jaws. He didn't want the massive torso. He just needed the engine. He closed his eyes and pulled on the quirk factor. Shift. There was no blinding flash of light this time, only a rapid, localized ripple of green energy. Izuku's specially modified uniform pants, designed by a support company with extreme elasticity, stretched to their absolute limit. Below his waist, Izuku Midoriya ceased to be human. His legs expanded, the bones lengthening and restructuring into the devastatingly powerful, digitigrade hind limbs of a Tyrannosaurus. Thick, forest green scales armored his thighs and calves. His feet burst out of his red sneakers, which he had quickly kicked off and stuffed in his backpack, revealing massive, three-toed claws that dug into the concrete alleyway, cracking it instantly. But the most crucial part of the transformation erupted from his lower back. A massive, heavy, muscular tail, nearly 8 feet long and thick as a tree trunk, manifested with a heavy thud against the ground. Izuku gasped, his upper, human half slouching forward under the sudden shift in gravity. He was now top-heavy, his human torso perched absurdly atop the monstrous lower half of an apex predator, but the tail instantly did its job. It rose off the ground, acting as a perfect biological counterbalance. Izuku leaned his human torso entirely parallel to the ground, his spine aligning with the massive tail. He felt the power humming in his massive, scaly legs. The sheer, terrifying kinetic energy stored in the dinosaur muscles was begging to be released. Izuku looked up at the fire escape of the building. It was 3 stories up. For a human, impossible. For a Tyrannosaurus? It was a light hop. Izuku coiled his massive, scaly legs. The muscles bulged, thick as steel cables. Boom! The concrete alleyway shattered beneath his talons as he launched himself upward. The G-force pressed his human face back, the wind roaring in his ears. He flew up, 3, 4, 5 stories into the air, completely bypassing the fire escape and clearing the edge of the rooftop. As he reached the apex of his jump, gravity began to pull him down. He was heading straight for a large AC unit. Izuku didn't panic. He whipped his massive tail to the left. The aerodynamic torque violently shifted his trajectory in midair, spinning his body away from the AC unit. He landed on the flat gravel of the roof with a heavy, booming thud, his digitigrade legs instantly absorbing the shock like perfectly tuned shock absorbers. Whoa! Izuku breathed, looking down at his human hands, then back at his massive, reptilian legs. He didn't have time to marvel. He started to run. To anyone looking up from the street, they would have only seen a blur of green leaping across the gaps between the buildings. Izuku's speed was terrifying. The T-Rex legs, designed to propel an 8-ton animal at 30 miles an hour, were currently only carrying 130 pounds of human weight. The strength-to-weight ratio was absurd. Izuku felt like he was flying. He sprinted to the edge of the roof, leaping across a 30-foot gap over a busy street. Below him, cars honked and people went about their daily lives, completely unaware of the dinosaur boy soaring above them. He landed on the next roof, his talons gouging deep trenches into the concrete. He bounded over chain-link fences, using his tail as a rudder to make impossibly sharp turns at breakneck speeds. For the first time in his life, the quirk didn't feel like a curse. It didn't feel like a monster. It felt like an extension of his own body, a brilliant, powerful tool. I can do this, Izuku thought, a massive, genuine smile breaking across his freckled face as he bounded over a water tower. I don't have to be a villain. I don't have to be a monster. I can control this power. I can be a hero. He saw the gates of Aldera Junior High approaching rapidly. Izuku skidded to a halt on the roof of a nearby convenience store. The friction of his scaly feet against the gravel sent up a small cloud of dust. He closed his eyes, exhaled sharply, and released the quirk. The heavy tail and massive legs dissolved into green steam, receding rapidly back into his body. His human legs returned, feeling absurdly weak and light in comparison. Gravity suddenly felt wrong, and Izuku tumbled forward, landing face first in the gravel. He groaned, rolling onto his back, completely exhausted. Using the quirk, even partially, burned through calories at an alarming rate. His stomach gave a loud, painful rumble. He was starving again. But as he sat up, brushing the dirt off his uniform and pulling his spare pair of red sneakers out of his backpack, he couldn't stop smiling. He climbed down the fire escape of the convenience store and jogged the rest of the way to school, slipping through the front gates just as the final warning bell rang. He was sweaty, covered in gravel dust, and his uniform was slightly stretched at the waist, but his eyes shone with a new, unshakable determination. He was Izuku Midoriya. He possessed the power of the Tyrant King. And he was going to Yui High School, even if he had to break down the doors to fit inside. Little did he know, his journey to becoming the greatest hero in history was about to accelerate in a way he could never have predicted. For on his way home from school that very afternoon, under the dark arches of a bridge, Izuku Midoriya was going to meet a villain made of sludge, and a hero made of absolute legend. The age of the dinosaur was far from over. It was just evolving. The biological cost of wielding a prehistoric apex predator's physique was, quite simply, astronomical. By the time the final bell rang at Aldera Junior High, Izuku Midoriya was vibrating with a deep, hollow hunger that felt less like an empty stomach and more like a cavernous void in his very soul. The partial shift he had utilized that morning to parkour across the city rooftops had burned through the 8 fried eggs and half loaf of bread within the first hour of homeroom. During lunch, he had consumed 3 oversized bento boxes packed tightly with rice, chicken, and beef, but it had barely taken the edge off. His quirk, Tyrant King, was a greedy furnace. The sheer mass of the dinosaur form was stored within a latent, interdimensional quirk space, but the energy required to pull that mass into reality, or to even maintain the biological pathways connecting his human form to the beast, required immense caloric fuel. Izuku slumped in his desk chair as the classroom emptied, his head resting against the cool wood. His stomach let out a low, rumbling groan that sounded suspiciously like a juvenile theropod's growl. "Shut up," Izuku whispered to his own abdomen, patting it softly. "I'll get a pork cutlet bowl on the way home." He slowly packed his notebooks into his yellow backpack, lingering on his scorched hero analysis for the future journal. The smell of burnt paper and caramelized sugar still clung to the pages, a stark reminder of Katsuki Bakugo's parting threat from the day before. "You think they'd let a brainless lizard into you, eh? You'd step on the people you're trying to save." The words echoed in his mind, cruel and biting. Izuku sighed, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Kaken was mean, but was he wrong? Society had a very specific image of what a hero looked like. They looked like All Might, tall, brightly colored, smiling, radiating safety. They did not look like a 40-foot-long, 8-ton scaly leviathan with teeth the size of railroad spikes. When All Might saved people, they cried tears of joy. When Izuku had accidentally transformed during a fire drill in elementary school, 3 teachers had stress-induced panic attacks. Izuku trudged out of the school building, his worn red sneakers scuffing against the pavement. The afternoon sun cast long, melancholic shadows across the streets of Mizudafa City. He decided to take the shortcut home, a route that passed beneath a wide, concrete overpass spanning a local canal. It was quiet, shaded, and most importantly, away from the crowded streets where his nervous tics might accidentally trigger a partial transformation. The shadows beneath the bridge were cool, a welcome respite from the afternoon heat. Izuku looked down at his phone, scrolling through Hero News forums. Mount Lady had debuted today, utilizing a gigantification quirk. See? Izuku thought, a small spark of hope igniting in his chest. She grows huge, and people love her. It's all about marketing and collateral damage control. If I can just prove that I can control my mass. A squelching, wet sound echoed in the tunnel. Izuku stopped. His eyes darted up. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the flow of the canal or the rumble of traffic overhead. It sounded like thick mud being stirred in a massive vat. Suddenly, a foul stench hit his nose, a mixture of raw sewage, stagnant water, and rotting garbage. Before Izuku could even turn around, the manhole cover 10 feet behind him blew off its hinges with a metallic clang, rattling against the concrete. From the dark abyss of the sewer, a massive, undulating wave of dark green, putrid sludge erupted upward. It didn't fall back down, it defied gravity, pooling and rising until it formed a towering, amorphous wall of liquid muck. 2 bulbous, erratic eyes formed within the viscous mass, followed by a jagged, wide mouth filled with uneven, yellow teeth. A medium-sized meat suit. The sludge villain gurgled, his voice bubbling and wet. Perfect. You'll do nicely to help me hide from that maniac. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. His hyperanalytical brain instantly went to work. Villain. Fluid body type. Physical strikes will be ineffective. Suffocation risk extremely high. Escape routes, blocked by the villain's mass. He needed to run, but his human legs felt like lead. The villain lunged. A tidal wave of foul-smelling sludge crashed down on Izuku, knocking him to the concrete. The impact was heavy, like being hit by a wave of wet cement. Instantly, thick, suffocating tendrils of muck forced their way into Izuku's mouth and nose. Don't fight it, kid! The villain cackled, pressing his fluid weight down. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Then I'll be in the driver's seat. Thanks for being my hero. Panic, raw and absolute, seized Izuku's heart. He was drowning on dry land. The sludge burned his lungs, tasting of rust and decay. He clawed at the fluid covering his face, but his human fingers passed right through it, finding no purchase. I'm going to die. As his vision began to darken at the edges, a different kind of survival instinct kicked in. It wasn't the logical, human desperation of a teenage boy. It was the ancient, dormant wrath of the tyrant king. Deep within Izuku's chest, the Quirk factor ignited. It recognized a lethal threat and bypassed Izuku's conscious restraint. If the human body was dying, the beast would take over to survive. Izuku's eyes, widening in terror, suddenly snapped from human emerald to a brilliant, glowing golden yellow. The pupils constricted into razor-thin vertical slits. Flash! A burst of emerald green steam erupted from Izuku's right arm. The sleeve of his school uniform shredded into confetti. In a microsecond, his human arm expanded, the skin hardening into thick, impenetrable green scales. Muscles swelled to the size of tree trunks as his hand morphed into 2 massive, scythe-like talons. He didn't need to find purchase on the sludge. He just needed to displace it. With a muffled, guttural growl that sounded like 2 tectonic plates grinding together, Izuku swung his newly manifested dinosaur arm. The sheer kinetic force of the heavy, scaly limb tore a massive hole through the villain's fluid body, scattering gallons of sludge against the tunnel walls. Ack! What the? The villain shrieked, reeling back as his liquid body was violently displaced. What kind of quirk is that? Izuku gasped, coughing up sludge as his human face was briefly freed. He tried to pull himself away, but the villain was fast. The sludge reformed instantly, wrapping like steel cables around Izuku's scaly arm and his human torso, pinning him down once more. A mutant type, huh? The villain roared angrily, shoving more sludge down Izuku's throat. Even better! Your body will be a great weapon once I hollow you out. The beast inside Izuku screamed to be let out. Full transformation. Crush him. Eat him. The predatory instincts slammed against the walls of Izuku's mind, demanding a full shift. But Izuku's human brain fought back with terrifying clarity. No! If I go full size in this tunnel, my mass will hit the overpass supports. The bridge will collapse. Cars will fall. People will die, even while suffocating, even while fighting off a prehistoric monster inside his own head. Izuku prioritized the lives of the civilians driving on the road above him. He gritted his teeth, forcibly restricting his own quirk, refusing to let his torso expand, tears of pain and oxygen deprivation streaming down his face. His vision faded to black. His dinosaur arm twitched, then slowly reverted to human flesh, the green steam fizzling out. He was losing. Suddenly, a heavy, rhythmic thudding echoed from the sewer grate. It wasn't the sound of sludge. It was the sound of purposeful, powerful footsteps. "Fear not, young man!" The voice boomed through the tunnel, instantly dispelling the shadows. It was a voice Izuku had heard a million times through laptop speakers and television screens, but feeling the sheer baritone vibration of it in person was entirely different. The manhole cover clattered away. Standing there, radiating an aura of sheer, unadulterated power, was a giant of a man in a white t-shirt and green cargo pants. His blonde hair was styled into two sweeping V-shaped bangs. A shadow seemed to perpetually obscure his eyes, while a blinding, perfectly white smile illuminated his face. "All Might?" the villain shrieked, the sludge trembling in terror. "I am here!" All Might roared. He pulled back his right arm, the muscles bulging with impossible tension. "Texas!" The villain lunged forward, desperately trying to take Izuku down with him. Smash! All Might threw the punch. He didn't even make physical contact. The sheer atmospheric pressure displaced by his fist created a localized hurricane within the tunnel. The shockwave hit the sludge villain like a freight train, atomizing the fluid body and scattering the villain into 1,000 harmless, gelatinous droplets across the concrete. The wind pressure sent Izuku tumbling backward. He rolled several times before coming to a halt, gasping desperately for air. He coughed violently, expelling the last of the foul-smelling sludge from his lungs. When he finally blinked his eyes open, his vision was filled with the most incredible sight he could imagine. All Might was standing over him, casually scooping the remnants of the sludge villain into 2 empty 2-liter soda bottles. "Are you all right, young man?" All Might asked, his smile as bright as the sun. "I apologize for getting you caught up in my villain hunt. Mistakes like that aren't my style, but this is a new city for me." Izuku's jaw hit the floor. His hyperactive mind short-circuited. All Might. In the flesh. The #1 hero. The symbol of peace. I. Izuku babbled, scrambling to his feet. He frantically looked around. "An autograph. I need an autograph. Where is my notebook?" He spotted his charred notebook lying on the ground. He scooped it up, flipping it open to a blank 2-page spread. But to his absolute shock, an impossibly large, bold signature was already splashed across the pages. He already signed it. Izuku shrieked, bowing repeatedly at 90-degree angles. "Thank you? Thank you so much. It will be a family heirloom. I'll pass it down for generations." All Might laughed, a hearty, booming sound. "Well, I must be off. I have to get this villain to the police." He tapped the soda bottles tucked into his oversized pockets. "Wait," Izuku blurted out. "Already? But I have a question. Something I need to ask you." "Pros are constantly battling time and enemies, young man," All Might said, crouching down. His legs coiled like springs. "Stand back. He's leaving. He's going to leave, and I'll never get to ask him." As All Might launched himself into the stratosphere, an incredibly stupid, highly impulsive thought crossed Izuku's mind. Before he could stop himself, he lunged forward, grabbing onto All Might's thick calf just as the hero took off. The wind hit Izuku like a physical wall. His cheeks flapped violently, his eyes watering as the city of Muzdalifa rapidly shrank beneath them. "Hey, hey, hey!" All Might yelled, looking down in shock. "What are you doing? Let go! Your fanaticism is too much. If I let go now, I'll die." Izuku screamed over the roaring wind. "Oh. Right," All Might realized. "Hold on tight and close your eyes." A minute later, they crashed onto the roof of a 3-story office building. Izuku rolled onto the gravel, panting, trembling, and utterly terrified. "Good grief," All Might sighed, stepping toward the roof access door. "If you knock on the door, someone will let you down. Now I really must go." "Wait!" Izuku yelled, scrambling to his feet. The question had been burning a hole in his soul since he was 4 years old. It was the question that dictated his entire existence. Can someone with a villain's quirk become a hero? Izuku shouted. All Might stopped. He didn't turn around. Izuku stared at the hero's broad back, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Everyone tells me my quirk is a monster's power. It's huge, it's destructive, and it terrifies people. When I try to help, people run away from me. They call me a villain waiting to happen. But I don't want to hurt anyone. I want to save people with a smile, just like you. Can a monster, can a terrifying beast become a symbol of peace? Silence hung heavily in the air. Then, suddenly, steam began to roll off All Might's body. Not the green, biological steam of Izuku's transformation, but a thick, white, hissing vapor. Izuku watched in horror as the towering, muscular symbol of peace seemed to deflate. The massive chest caved in, the broad shoulders shrunk, and the muscular arms withered into skin and bone. The steam cleared, revealing a skeletal, gaunt man with sunken eyes and clothes that hung off him like a scarecrow. What? Izuku shrieked, looking wildly around the roof. Where did All Might go? Are you an imposter? A fake? The skeletal man coughed, a small spray of blood spattering from his mouth. I am All Might, he sighed, his voice completely stripped of its booming baritone. He sat down heavily against the roof railing, pulling up his baggy t-shirt. Izuku gasped. Covering the entire left side of All Might's chest and abdomen was a horrific, spider-webbed scar of twisted, purple flesh. It looked like a crater. 5 years ago, All Might said quietly, an enemy did this to me. My respiratory system was nearly destroyed. My stomach was removed. I've endured repeated surgeries. Right now, I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Izuku's mind raced. 5 years ago, the toxic chainsaw fight? No, that was made public. This is a secret. The symbol of peace is crippled. Why are you showing me this? Izuku asked, his voice trembling. All Might looked at Izuku, his sunken blue eyes piercing right through the boy. You want to know if a terrifying monster can be a symbol of peace? I'll tell you the truth, kid. The smile I wear? The confident laugh? It's a mask. It's a bluff to distract the public from the fear inside me. Pro-heroes must always risk their lives. It's a dangerous, bloody, brutal profession. All Might stood up, leaning heavily on the railing. A quirk that terrifies people, a quirk built for destruction. All Might shook his head slowly. If your power is inherently destructive, if it cannot be controlled without causing collateral damage or inciting panic, then no. I cannot honestly tell you that you can be a pro-hero. The words struck Izuku like a physical blow. It was worse than anything Kaken had ever said. It was coming from God himself. People need to feel safe, All Might continued, his tones softening with pity. If your presence creates fear, you cannot be a symbol of peace. If you want to help people, become a police officer. They get a lot of grief because villains get handed to them, but it is a fine profession. It's not bad to dream, young man. But you have to consider what's realistic. With that, All Might turned and walked through the roof access door, leaving Izuku alone on the gravel roof. Izuku stood there for a long time. The wind whipped past him, hollow and cold. The dream that had sustained him, the dream he had meticulously planned and analyzed and starved himself for, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He didn't cry. He was too numb for tears. He's right, Izuku thought, staring blankly at his scuffed shoes. I'm a walking disaster. I'm a dinosaur. Dinosaurs belong in museums, not on hero patrols. Izuku didn't remember climbing down the stairs. He didn't remember walking through the city streets. He was moving on autopilot, a ghost haunting his own life. His notebook felt heavy in his hand. He was tempted to throw it in the nearest trash can. What was the point of analyzing theropod biomechanics if he was just going to be a police officer sitting behind a desk? As he walked past the Tatooine shopping district, a loud explosion jolted him out of his trance. Boom! Black smoke billowed into the sky from an alleyway ahead. A crowd of bystanders had formed a tight perimeter, held back by police tape. Fire licked at the sides of the buildings, and the sound of breaking glass echoed through the street. Izuku's feet moved on their own. Despite everything, the hero fanatic in him couldn't resist a villain fight. He squeezed his way to the front of the crowd, looking past the yellow tape. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was the sludge villain. How? Izuku thought, panic rising in his chest. All Might had him in the bottles. The bottles. Izuku's hand shot to his pocket. He remembered the feeling of All Might launching them into the air. The G-force. The bottles must have fallen out of his pockets when he grabbed onto him. It's my fault. This is my fault. The villain had grown massive, absorbing the fires around him to create an impenetrable wall of heat and sludge. Several pro-heroes were on the scene. Death Arms was trying to punch the sludge, but his fists sank uselessly into the mud. Kamui Woods was attempting to bind the villain, but the fires burned his wooden branches. Mount Lady was standing at the entrance to the alleyway, looking frustrated. I need at least a 2-lane road to engage, Mount Lady complained. If I grow here, I'll destroy the buildings. She can't use her mass, Izuku analyzed bleakly. Just like me. Then, Izuku saw the hostage. Trapped in the center of the undulating sludge, struggling violently, was a boy with spiky ash-blonde hair, Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki was firing off explosions from his palms, desperate to break free, but the villain was just using the explosions to feed the fires around them. Katsuki's face was turning purple, the sludge forcing its way into his mouth and nose. Izuku locked eyes with Katsuki. In that split second, Izuku didn't see the arrogant bully who had told him to go extinct. He didn't see the kid who had burned his notebook. He saw a boy who was drowning. He saw eyes filled with the exact same paralyzing, suffocating terror Izuku had felt under the bridge. The heroes were doing nothing. They were waiting for someone with a better quirk. No one is coming, Izuku realized. Before his brain could formulate a plan, before logic or fear or All Might's crushing words could stop him, Izuku Midoriya dropped his notebook. He dashed past the police tape. Hey! Kid! Stop! Death Arms yelled, reaching for him. Izuku didn't hear him. He sprinted toward the wall of fire and sludge. The heat blistered his skin, but he didn't care. His mind was completely blank, save for one single, blindingly clear thought. Save him. As Izuku ran, he felt it. The ancient, terrifying beast within his soul, the dormant DNA of the apex predator, stirred. But this time, it wasn't acting out of survival. It wasn't acting out of rage. It felt the absolute, unyielding intent of the human boy it inhabited. You want power? The beast seemed to rumble in his mind. Take it all. Izuku leaped into the air. He took a massive, lung-expanding breath, closed his eyes, and unleashed the cage completely. He didn't focus on a partial shift. He didn't hold anything back. Full transformation. The resulting explosion of green light was blinding, eclipsing the flames in the alleyway. The sound that followed was not the tearing of fabric, but a deafening, concussive boom that shattered the remaining windows on the street. A shockwave of displaced air blew the fire backward, extinguishing it instantly. Thick, emerald steam billowed out, momentarily obscuring the entire intersection. The crowd gasped. The heroes froze. From within the steam, a massive, scaly foot the size of a compact car slammed onto the pavement. The concrete spiderwebbed, a small crater forming beneath the 3 razor-sharp talons. The steam parted. Standing in the center of the street was a fully grown, biologically accurate, 40-foot-long Tyrannosaurus rex. The sheer scale of the creature was incomprehensible. Its heavy, muscular tail swept back, completely blocking the street behind it. Its massive, muscular thighs rippled beneath impenetrable, dark green armor plating. Its torso was a barrel of raw, predatory power, leading up to a thick neck and a skull the size of a boulder. The T-Rex lowered its massive head, fixing its glowing, slit-pupiled eyes directly on the sludge villain. The villain stopped moving. The sludge froze. Even Katsuki, half-conscious, stared up at the prehistoric leviathan looming over him. The silence was absolute. Then, Izuku opened his jaws. He didn't just roar. He unleashed a sound that defied modern biology. It was a deafening, low-frequency bellow that rattled the teeth and the skulls of everyone present. It was a sound that triggered the primal, monkey-brain terror in every human within a 5-mile radius. It was the sound of extinction. The sonic force of the roar physically pushed the sludge villain back, ripples forming across his liquid body. What the hell is that thing? The villain shrieked, his composure completely shattering. Where did it come from? Inside the mind of the beast, Izuku was fighting the hardest battle of his life. The predatory instincts were deafening. The dinosaur brain screamed at him to stomp the sludge, to thrash it, to bite down with 8,000 pounds of force and annihilate the prey. No! Izuku's human consciousness roared back. Kaken is inside. Precision. Control. We are not a monster. We are a hero. The T-Rex lunged. It was impossibly fast for its size. The massive jaws snapped open, revealing rows of serrated, 6-inch teeth. The villain tried to strike back, whipping tendrils of thick sludge across the dinosaur's snout. The strikes hit with the force of steel beams, but they bounced harmlessly off Izuku's thick, armored scales. Izuku didn't even blink. He thrust his massive snout directly into the center of the sludge mass. The T-Rex brain screamed to crush. Izuku forced his jaws open, calculating the exact trajectory, the exact distance. He felt the sludge parting around his scaly lips. He felt the fabric of Katsuki's school uniform brush against his tongue. With excruciating, agonizing restraint, Izuku closed his jaws. He didn't bite down. He merely created a cage with his teeth. He scooped Katsuki up in his mouth, ensuring that not a single razor-sharp tooth grazed the boy's flesh. Then, with a powerful thrust of his massive neck, Izuku ripped his head backward. The sudden, violent motion pulled Katsuki completely free from the sludge, the vacuum seal breaking with a loud schluck. The villain screamed in fury as his hostage was stolen. Give him back! Izuku turned his massive head toward the heroes, slowly parting his jaws and tilting his head. Katsuki, completely covered in slime but breathing, slid out of the T-Rex's mouth and landed safely in the arms of a stunned Kamui Woods. Katsuki looked up, coughing, locking eyes with the golden, slit-pupiled gaze of the monster that had just saved him. With the hostage clear, Izuku turned his attention back to the villain. He didn't need to hold back anymore. He raised his massive right leg, preparing to stomp the villain into the city's drainage system. But before he could bring his foot down, a blur of motion intercepted him. I really am pathetic. All Might materialized from the crowd, his muscular form restored, though blood was leaking from the corner of his mouth. He had been watching. He had seen the boy he had dismissed, the boy with the terrifying, villainous quirk, throw himself into a hell's cape while the pros stood by. All Might grabbed the sludge villain by the center mass. Detroit. All Might pulled his fist back. Izuku, realizing what was about to happen, quickly shifted his massive weight, turning his broad, armored back toward the crowd of civilians and curling his heavy tail around them to act as a living shield. Smash! The punch connected. The resulting shockwave was apocalyptic. The air pressure blew the sludge villain apart at the molecular level. A massive tornado spawned in the middle of the street, shooting upward into the sky. Izuku planted his massive talons into the concrete, taking the brunt of the wind pressure against his armored back, ensuring the civilians behind him didn't feel a breeze. As the wind died down, the sky above them darkened. A single drop of water hit Izuku's scaly snout. Then another. It started to rain. All Might had punched the villain so hard he had changed the weather. The street was silent, save for the patter of rain. Izuku slowly uncurled his massive body. He looked at All Might, who gave him a brief, approving nod. The adrenaline abruptly vanished, replaced by an overwhelming, crushing wave of exhaustion. The caloric debt of the full transformation hit Izuku like a physical blow. He let out a soft, tired chirp. Release. The massive, 40-foot dinosaur dissolved into a cloud of thick, green steam. As the vapor cleared, Izuku Midoriya was left kneeling on the cracked pavement. His uniform shirt was completely gone, shredded into dust during the transformation. He was bare-chested, shivering in the rain, wearing only his specially modified stretch pants and a single, miraculously intact red sneaker. He looked small. He looked fragile. He looked entirely human. The aftermath was chaotic. The pros immediately swarmed them. Katsuki was praised by the heroes for his powerful quirk and his endurance, though the blonde boy remained uncharacteristically silent, glaring at the ground. Izuku, on the other hand, was aggressively scolded. What were you thinking, kid? Death Arms yelled, jabbing a finger into Izuku's chest. You have a massive mutative transformation quirk. Do you know how dangerous it is to deploy a giant monster in a crowded street? You could have crushed us. You could have collapsed the buildings. I was careful. Izuku stammered, looking at the ground. Careful doesn't cut it. Leave it to the pros. You're a liability looking like that. Izuku took the scolding in silence. The familiar sting of rejection washed over him. Even when he did everything right, even when he saved the day with absolute precision and zero collateral damage, he was still just a monster to them. Once he was finally released, Izuku began the long, quiet walk home. The evening sun was setting, casting long shadows. He was exhausted, shirtless, and his stomach was screaming for food. Well, Izuku thought numbly. At least Kaken is safe. That's what a hero is supposed to do, right? Even if they hate you for it. DKU. Izuku stopped. He turned around. Katsuki was running down the street toward him, panting heavily. The blonde boy stopped a few feet away, his fists clenched, his red eyes burning with a confusing mix of anger and profound humiliation. Listen to me, you damn nerd! Katsuki yelled. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't need you to save me. I would have gotten out of there myself. Don't you dare think you're better than me just because you have some giant lizard quirk. You're still just Deku. Katsuki spun on his heel and stomped away, his pride desperately trying to piece itself back together. Izuku watched him go, a small, tired smile touching his lips. Classic Kaken. He turned to continue his walk home, but as he rounded the corner, a massive figure suddenly burst out from an alleyway, striking a dramatic pose. I am here! All Might boomed. Izuku yelped, jumping backward. All Might? What are you doing here? How did you get past the reporters? Ha! I stand for justice, not sound bites. All Might laughed. Suddenly, the hero coughed violently, a cloud of steam enveloping him. He deflated back into his skeletal form, wiping a trail of blood from his chin. Izuku's eyes widened. Are you okay? All Might held up a hand, silencing him. The skeletal man's expression turned deeply serious. He walked toward Izuku, his posture devoid of the larger-than-life persona. Young man, All Might said quietly. I came here to thank you. And to apologize. Izuku blinked, confused. Apologize? Earlier today, I told you to be realistic. I looked at your quirk, at the sheer, terrifying nature of it, and I judged you. I told you that a power built for destruction couldn't be a symbol of peace. All Might bowed his head slightly. I was wrong. I am ashamed of my words, All Might. Izuku whispered, his eyes widening. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't told me your story, I would have been a worthless bystander watching that boy die, All Might said, looking up, his blue eyes blazing with intensity. Out of all the people there, all the heroes with their flashy, socially acceptable quirks, you were the only one who acted. You, the boy who is terrified of his own power, threw away your fear to save a life. Tears pricked Izuku's eyes. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his breath hitching. I watched you, young Midoriya, All Might continued, stepping closer. I watched a creature born to hunt, a beast driven by the instinct to kill, perform the most delicate, gentle rescue I have ever seen. You fought your own nature to save a boy who hated you. All Might placed a heavy, warm hand on Izuku's bare shoulder. You have the body of a tyrant, young man, All Might said, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. But you have the heart of a true hero. The dam broke. Izuku fell to his knees on the concrete, the tears streaming down his face. He sobbed, the heavy, agonizing weight of 10 years of rejection, fear, and self-doubt washing away. He said it. The man I admire most in the world, he sees me. All Might knelt beside him, letting the boy cry. After a few moments, the hero spoke again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You are worthy to inherit my power. Izuku's sobbing hitched. He looked up, his tear-streaked face contorted in sheer confusion. Huh! All Might smiled, a genuine, skeletal grin. Inherit my power. My quirk is not a natural occurrence. It is a sacred torch, passed from generation to generation. It is called One for All. It cultivates the physical power of its users, stockpiling it, and passing it on to the next. I have been searching for a successor. And I have chosen you. Izuku stared at him, his hyper-analytical brain trying to process the information. A quirk that can be passed down. But I already have a quirk. A massive one. What happens if you give an energy stockpiling quirk to someone who can turn into a dinosaur? All Might paused. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, honestly, I have no idea. But I imagine it will be spectacularly powerful. You already possess the ultimate vessel, Midoriya. Now I am offering you the ultimate engine to drive it. All Might stood up, extending a hand to Izuku. The path ahead will be brutal, All Might said. You will have to train harder than you ever have before to master both the beast within you and the power I will give you. But if you do, I promise you, Izuku Midoriya, you will become the greatest hero the world has ever seen. Izuku looked at the extended hand. He wiped the tears from his eyes. He thought of the terrified civilians. He thought of Kaken. He thought of the prehistoric predator sleeping within his DNA, waiting for a master to guide it. He didn't hesitate. Izuku reached out and grabbed All Might's hand. I'll do it, Izuku said, his voice steady and resolute. I'll be a hero. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was less of a scenic coastal retreat and more of an industrial graveyard. For years, the ocean currents had dragged the city's discarded sins onto the sand, while lazy locals had used the isolated stretch of coastline as an illegal dumping ground for everything from broken microwaves to gutted pickup trucks. It was an eyesore. A tragedy of urban decay. And, according to Toshinori Yagi, the skeletal man who was secretly the world's greatest hero, it was the perfect gym. A hero is a volunteer, young Midoriya. All Might's voice rang out, carried by the salty ocean breeze. He sat atop a rusted refrigerator, a stopwatch in his oversized, bony hand. They are the ones who clean up the messes that ordinary people ignore. Restoring this beach to its former glory is the first step toward restoring society's faith in your heroism. Now less talking, more hauling. I wasn't talking. Izuku strained, his voice a tight, strangled gasp. He was currently attempting to move a dilapidated, rust-eaten Ford pickup truck. He was in his human form, his bare feet digging deeply into the wet sand. Thick, heavy ropes were wrapped around his shoulders and tied to the truck's front axle. His scrawny muscles trembled under the strain, his face purple with exertion. Your Quirk, Tyrant King, is a marvel of biological engineering, All Might called down, sipping from a thermos. But it relies entirely on a central anchor, your baseline human body. If your human heart cannot pump the necessary blood, if your human lungs cannot process the oxygen, and if your human skeleton cannot handle the interdimensional strain of housing 8 tons of prehistoric mass, passing one for all to you will blow your limbs clean off. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a primal, frustrated groan. If the human vessel is weak, All Might continued, pointing a skeletal finger at him, the dinosaur will collapse under the weight of my power. You must forge this body into a fortress. 10 months. That was all the time Izuku had before the UA High School entrance exam. When All Might had first presented his aim to pass, American Dream Plan, it had been designed for a normal teenager. But after reviewing Izuku's notebooks and consulting with a private quirk biology specialist, All Might had brutally revised the schedule. It was dubbed the Aim to Pass, Mesozoic-era plan. Izuku didn't just need to clean the beach. He needed to eat everything in sight, lift impossible weights, and master the transition between his human and theropod forms without succumbing to the feral instincts that clouded his judgment. Okay. All Might. I'm switching. Izuku panted, dropping to one knee. Do it. All Might commanded, hitting the stopwatch. Show me the control. Izuku closed his eyes. He regulated his breathing, pulling the immense, heavy energy from the center of his chest. He didn't want the full shift. That would drain his daily caloric intake in 5 minutes. He focused purely on his lower half. Shift. A sharp hiss of emerald steam erupted from his waist down. The heavy ropes went taut as Izuku's human legs exploded in mass, the bones loudly cracking and restructuring into the massive, tree-trunk-thick digitigrade legs of a Tyrannosaurus. The deep green, armored scales gleamed in the morning sun, 3 massive talons gouging deeply into the wet sand. Behind him, the heavy, muscular tail manifested, slamming onto the beach and sending up a spray of sand. Because his upper half was still human, he was pitched forward, his torso running parallel to the ground to counterbalance the tail. Go! All Might shouted. Izuku's eyes snapped open, the pupils now golden, predatory slits. He let out a strange, hybrid grunt, half human exertion, half reptilian hiss. His massive theropod thighs coiled, the muscles visibly bulging beneath the scales. He drove his talons backward. The rusted Ford pickup, which had refused to budge for an hour, was suddenly yanked forward with the violence of a toy on a string. Izuku sprinted across the beach, his human arms flailing comically as his dinosaur legs ate up the distance, dragging the 2-ton vehicle as if it were a sled made of cardboard. He hauled it all the way to the designated scrapyard zone near the boardwalk, whipping his heavy tail to unhook the ropes before letting the truck crash into a pile of washing machines. With a sharp exhale, the steam returned, and Izuku's legs reverted. He collapsed onto his back in the sand, his chest heaving, his human legs trembling with phantom fatigue. All Might leaped down from the fridge, landing lightly beside him. 30 seconds. Incredible speed, young Midoriya. Your partial manifestations are becoming seamless. Hungry? Izuku croaked, staring blankly at the sky. So hungry. All Might chuckled, reaching into his cargo pocket and pulling out a massive, foil-wrapped bundle. Your mother sent these. She is a saint, though I worry I am bankrupting her grocery budget. Izuku sat up so fast he nearly pulled a muscle. He snatched the bundle, tearing the foil open to reveal 6 massive steak and rice onigiri. He devoured them with the ferocity of a starving animal, barely chewing. Maintaining the partial shift required terrifying amounts of energy. The Midoriya household's food budget had tripled in the last 6 months. Inko had taken up couponing with a terrifying, almost villainous intensity just to keep her son fed. You're making excellent progress, Izuku, All Might said gently, his skeletal face softening. Your restraint is impeccable. I know the feral instincts of your quirk want you to go full size, to roar and smash. Holding the beast back requires immense mental fortitude. Izuku swallowed a mouthful of rice. It's getting easier. The more I train my human body, the more I feel like I'm the one driving, not the dinosaur. But All Might, what happens when I add 1 for all? I've been doing the math. If OFA is a raw power multiplier, and my base T-Rex bike force is already 8,000 psi, it will be cataclysmic, All Might agreed solemnly. Which is why you must not use 1 for all in your full transformation until you are absolutely certain your human vessel can survive the recoil. The energy feedback from a dinosaur-scaled smash could shatter your bones when you revert. Izuku gulped, looking down at his scarred, calloused hands. Right. No full-scale 1 for all unless it's an absolute emergency. Exactly. Now, break time is over. Those tires aren't going to haul themselves. The months bled together in a grueling symphony of sweat, sand, and agonizing muscle aches. Autumn turned to winter, the freezing ocean winds whipping across Dagoba Beach. Izuku trained through the cold, using the thermal mass of his reptilian shifts to keep his core temperature up. Winter thawed into spring, and Izuku's body underwent a profound metamorphosis. He was no longer the scrawny, trembling boy who had cowered in the classroom. His shoulders had broadened. His chest and arms were corded with dense, highly compressed muscle. He had a swimmer's physique, lean, but packed with coiled tension, designed purely to anchor the prehistoric titan sleeping within him. And then, the day finally arrived, the morning of the UA entrance exam. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a brilliant orange glow over the ocean. All Might, in his skeletal form, drove his beat-up truck toward Dagoba Beach Park. He expected to find Izuku asleep in the sand, exhausted from the final night of hauling. Instead, All Might stepped out of his truck and stopped dead in his tracks. The beach was unrecognizable. The towering mountains of rusted metal, rotting tires, and decaying appliances were completely gone. The white sand was pristine, sloping gently down to the rolling ocean waves, and standing atop a massive, neatly stacked ziggurat of scrap metal on the boardwalk, silhouetted against the rising sun, was Izuku Midoriya. He was shirtless, sweat gleaming on his heavily muscled torso. He tilted his head back toward the sky, but he didn't shout. He didn't cheer. He let out a long, echoing, triumphant roar. It wasn't the deafening bellow of the T-Rex, but a human cry laced with the resonant, thrumming vibration of the apex predator inside him. All Might felt a shiver run down his spine. The boy was ready. All Might suddenly expanded, a burst of steam announcing his transformation into his muscular, larger-than-life form. He leaped onto the pile of trash, landing heavily beside Izuku. "Excellent work, young Midoriya!" All Might boomed, clapping a massive hand onto Izuku's bare shoulder. "You didn't just finish the plan, you exceeded it. You cleaned the entire beach, even the sections I told you to ignore." Izuku panted, a wide, exhausted smile on his face. I couldn't stop. The quirk, the more I worked, the more it wanted to keep going. I feel like I could pull a train with my teeth right now. "Do not eat trains, my boy, they are terrible for your digestion." All Might laughed. He turned to Izuku, his expression shifting into one of profound pride. "You have built the vessel, you have tamed the tyrant. Now, it is time for your reward." All Might reached up and, with a sharp yank, plucked a single strand of brilliant blonde hair from his head. He held it out to Izuku, the morning sun catching the golden strand. "This is it, Izuku," All Might said, his voice dropping to a solemn, resonant register. "The crystallization of power. The legacy of One for All. To inherit this power, you must consume some of my DNA." Izuku stared at the hair. His eyes widened. His lip quivered. "Eat this," All Might commanded, thrusting the hair toward Izuku's face. Izuku blinked. The profound, emotional weight of the moment completely derailed. "Huh! Eat it! We're running out of time before the exam. Just swallow it, it's not a big deal." "I have to eat your hair?" Izuku shrieked, his human anxiety violently reasserting itself. "Is that hygienic? What if I choke? What if my T-Rex stomach acids dissolve the DNA before it takes effect?" "Stop analyzing and chew, boy." Down the hatch. 5 minutes later, Izuku was gagging, washing the blonde hair down with a lukewarm bottle of water. He clutched his stomach, waiting for a miraculous explosion of power, a surge of golden lightning, or perhaps a sudden urge to flex his muscles. He felt absolutely nothing. "It takes 2 or 3 hours to digest and integrate into your quirk factor," All Might explained, returning to his skeletal form and checking his watch. "You'll likely feel the spark right as the practical exam begins. Remember, Izuku, One for All is a multiplier. If you use it while fully transformed, you will be wielding power beyond anything this world has seen. Use it sparingly. Rely on your base quirk for the small fry." Izuku nodded, his emerald eyes burning with determination. "I understand. Thank you, All Might. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," All Might grinned. "Go past that exam." The towering gates of Yue High School looked less like a school entrance, and more like the gates to a military fortress. Izuku stood at the bottom of the long, paved walkway, staring up at the massive glass and steel H-shaped building. He was dressed in his standard middle school uniform, his yellow backpack slung over his shoulder. "I'm here," Izuku thought, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I actually made it." He took a step forward. As he did, his sneaker caught the edge of an uneven paving stone. His newfound muscles, perfectly tuned for shifting tons of mass, violently overcompensated for the slight trip. Izuku launched himself forward, hurtling face first toward the concrete at a terrifying speed. "Oh God, I'm going to die before I even take the written test." "Release!" a cheerful voice called out. Suddenly, all gravity vanished. Izuku stopped dead in midair, floating inches above the pavement, his arms and legs flailing comically. "Are you okay?" Izuku turned his head. Standing next to him was a girl with a round, incredibly cute face, permanent pink blushes on her cheeks, and a short brown bob. She pressed her fingertips together. "Sorry I used my quirk on you without asking," she smiled warmly. "But it would be bad luck if you fell right before the exam, right?" Izuku's brain completely short-circuited. He had spent the last 10 months talking to All Might, seagulls, and the monstrous voices in his own head. He had zero experience talking to cute girls. Yeah. Izuku sputtered, his face turning the color of a ripe tomato. The girl giggled, riding him so his feet touched the ground. "I'm Ochiko Uraraka. I'm super nervous, aren't you? Let's both do our best." She waved and jogged toward the entrance, leaving Izuku standing completely frozen on the walkway. "I just talked to a girl." Izuku's internal monologue screamed in victory. "Well, she talked to me, And I made a weird noise, but it counts. Out of my way, Deku. The victory was short-lived. Izuku flinched as Katsuki Bakugo shoved past him, hands shoved deep in his pockets, his red eyes glaring straight ahead. 10 months hadn't softened Katsuki's hostility. If anything, the incident with the sludge villain had made him even more intensely aggressive toward Izuku. Keikaken! Good morning! Izuku stammered, stepping aside. Katsuki paused, glancing at Izuku out of the corner of his eye. He noticed the changes. Deku wasn't slouching anymore. His uniform shirt was tight across his chest and shoulders. He didn't look like a frail, easily broken toy. He looked solid. Katsuki clicked his tongue in irritation. Don't get in my way today, lizard. Or I'll turn you into a pair of boots. Izuku watched Katsuki walk away. Surprisingly, the threat didn't paralyze him like it used to. The beast inside Izuku merely let out a low, internal scoff. Boots? Please. My scales are fireproof. The written exam went smoothly. Izuku's obsessive studying and hyper-analytical note-taking paid off. He breezed through the math and hero law sections, his mind sharp and focused. But the real challenge was the orientation for the practical exam. Izuku sat in the massive, darkened auditorium, dwarfed by the hundreds of other applicants. To his absolute horror, he was seated directly next to Katsuki. On the brightly lit stage, the voice hero, Present Mike, was putting on a show, explaining the rules of the practical test. As it says in the application requirements, you listeners will be conducting a 10-minute mock urban battle. Present Mike shouted, posing dramatically. You'll be dropped into a replica cityscape. Inside, you'll find 3 types of faux villains, worth 1, 2, and 3 points respectively. Use your quirks to rack up points. But remember, attacking other examinees is a massive red card. Izuku was furiously muttering to himself, his pencil flying across his notebook. Urban setting. Confined spaces. Full transformation is completely off the table. I'd smash the buildings and lose points for collateral damage. I need to rely on the raptor-style partial shifts. Heavy tail for balance, digitigrade legs for speed. If I focus purely on agility, I can outpace the other applicants and steal the targets. Hey! A tall boy with glasses, slick-back blue hair, and a ridiculously intense scowl stood up a few rows ahead. He pointed rigidly at Izuku. You, with the unkempt hair! The boy barked. You have been muttering incessantly this entire time. It is highly distracting. If you are here on a pleasure trip, I suggest you leave immediately. UA is the Premier Hero Academy, not a place for idle chatter. The entire auditorium turned to look at Izuku. Snickers rippled through the crowd. Katsuki glared at him, pure murder in his eyes. Izuku shrank back into his seat, his face burning. I am so sorry. He squeaked, covering his mouth. Behind him, entirely outside of his control, the fabric of his pants rippled slightly as a tiny, 2-foot-long, scaly green tail momentarily popped into existence, curling defensively around his legs before evaporating into steam. It was an involuntary stress response, a physical manifestation of his desire to hide. Fortunately, Present Mike diffused the tension, explaining the existence of a 4th robot, the Zero Pointer, a massive obstacle designed solely to be avoided. That's all from me, listeners. Present Mike cheered. Go out there and show us what you're made of. Plus Ultra! Battle Center B was a breathtaking feat of engineering. It was an entire, fully functioning city district enclosed within towering concrete walls. Izuku stood near the back of the massive crowd of applicants gathered at the massive metal gates. He had changed into a dark green, heavily reinforced tracksuit. He had specifically ordered the pants from a support gear catalog. They were woven with memory mesh that could stretch up to 40 times its original size without tearing. Designed specifically for rapid mutant-type shifts. He looked around. The other applicants were stretching, showing off their quirks. He spotted the nice girl, Uraraka, taking deep breaths near the front. He spotted the strict boy with the glasses, whose calves literally had exhaust pipes jutting out of them. Everyone looked so strong, Izuku thought, a brief wave of anxiety washing over him. Suddenly, a strange, warm sensation blossomed in the center of his chest. It wasn't the heavy, ancient gravity of the Tyrant King. It was something lighter, fiercely bright, and crackling with raw, boundless energy. One for all, Izuku realized. It's digested. It's here. He closed his eyes, feeling the two powers resting within him. To his surprise, they didn't clash. The ancient, predatory instinct of the T-Rex seemed to welcome the radiant energy of One for All, wrapping around it like a dragon hoarding a precious sun. Right, let's start. Present Mick's voice echoed from a massive speaker tower. The crowd blinked in confusion. There was no countdown. The massive metal gates slowly began to groan open. What are you waiting for? Mike yelled. There are no countdowns in real battles. Run, run, run! The crowd surged forward, a chaotic stampede of teenagers. Izuku didn't run with them. He stood completely still, taking a deep, centering breath. Raptor style. Shift. Emerald steam violently erupted from Izuku's waist, billowing outwards and forcing the applicants near him to back away coughing. What the? A boy with a sword, Quirk yelled. Out of the steam, Izuku shot forward. He didn't just run. He exploded off the starting line. His human torso was pitched forward, aerodynamically flat, while his massive, muscular, deep green T-Rex legs propelled him with terrifying force. His thick, heavy tail whipped side to side behind him, maintaining perfect balance. His three-toed talons dug into the pavement, launching him forward in massive, 30-foot bounds. He cleared the gate and was instantly at the front of the pack, leaving the other applicants eating his dust. Whoa! Look at that guy go! Someone shouted behind him. Izuku hit the first intersection of the foe's city. His slit-pupiled eyes immediately tracked movement to his left. 3 one-pointer robots, rolling on tank treads and brandishing mechanical claws, turned their single red optical sensors toward him. Target acquired, the robots buzzed in unison. Izuku didn't slow down. He didn't use One for All. He relied entirely on the terrifying biomechanics of his base quirk. A T-Rex's leg is designed to carry an 8-ton animal at burst speeds of 30 miles an hour. Using that same leg muscle to launch a 130-pound human body resulted in physics-defying agility. Izuku vaulted into the air, easily clearing 20 feet. He brought his right leg down in a devastating axe kick. The razor-sharp, scythe-like talon in the center of his foot struck the first one-pointer squarely on its head chassis. The metal didn't just dent, it sheared cleanly apart. The robot exploded into a shower of sparks and loose cogs as Izuku crushed it entirely beneath his heel. 1 point! He immediately used the crushed robot as a springboard, launching himself at the adjacent wall of a faux office building. He hit the wall laterally, his talons gripping the concrete. He ran along the vertical surface for 3 steps, defying gravity with sheer momentum, before violently whipping his heavy tail. The 8-foot solid muscle appendage swung like a wrecking ball, smashing perfectly through the optical sensors of the remaining 2 one-pointers. Crash! 3 points! Izuku landed gracefully, his digitigrade legs absorbing the impact flawlessly. He didn't pause to celebrate. His predatory instincts were fully engaged, his vision sharpened, his ears picking up the mechanical whirring of targets blocks away. Next! Izuku hissed, bounding down the street. High above the battle center, hidden within a darkened observation room, the faculty of UA High School watched the monitors. Fascinating, Nizu, the principal, a creature resembling a stoat or a bear or a dog, murmured, sipping his tea. We have quite a diverse crop this year. Look at applicant Bakugo, utilizing explosive propulsion for incredible mobility. He's violent, but effective, commented Midnight, the R-rated hero. But what about examinee 7111? Asked Snipe, pointing a gloved finger at a specific monitor. The Midoriya kid. On the screen, Izuku was an absolute blur of green scales and kinetic violence. He was performing a masterclass in spatial awareness. He wasn't transforming his upper body at all, relying entirely on his legs and tail. He moved like a velociraptor, ricocheting off walls, leaping over the heads of other applicants, and utterly dismantling 2-pointers and 3-pointers with devastating kicks and tail sweeps. A partial transformation mutative quirk, Aizawa Shota noted, his dark, tired eyes narrowing. Highly logical application. A full transformation of a prehistoric theropod in this environment would cause unacceptable collateral damage. He's compressing his power, focusing purely on speed and blunt force trauma. All Might stood in the back of the room, his skeletal form hidden in the shadows. He grinned widely, pride swelling in his chest. You're doing it, Izuku. You're showing them that the beast can be a hero. Back in the city, the toll was beginning to catch up to Izuku. 32, 35, 38 points. Izuku mentally tallied, panting heavily. He leaned against the brick wall of a faux building, sweat pouring down his human face. The steam radiating from his scaly legs was growing thicker. The biological cost of maintaining the shift, coupled with the explosive exertion, was draining his glycogen stores rapidly. His stomach let out a loud, hollow groan. I need more points to be safe, Izuku thought, his vision blurring slightly. Just a few more minutes. He pushed himself off the wall, preparing to track down another three-pointer. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet trembled. It wasn't a minor vibration. It was a localized, tectonic event. The glass in the windows of the surrounding buildings shattered. A shadow fell over the street, blocking out the morning sun. 2 minutes remaining. President Mick's voice announced cheerfully. At the end of the main avenue, the faux buildings violently separated. Dust and debris rained down like a waterfall. From the smoke, a metallic monstrosity emerged, the zero-pointer. It was staggeringly huge. It dwarfed the surrounding skyscrapers, easily standing over 200 feet tall. It rolled forward on massive, city-block-sized treads, raising a metallic arm the size of a submarine. With a casual swipe, it obliterated the top 3 floors of an adjacent building. It's a kaiju! One of the applicants screamed, dropping his weapons. Run! Panic erupted. The teenagers who had been bravely fighting a moment ago turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, terrified by the sheer, insurmountable scale of the obstacle. Izuku's primal instincts immediately assessed the threat. Alpha predator detected. Target mass, unbeatable. Recommend immediate retreat, Izuku agreed. He turned, ready to use his theropod legs to outrun the entire crowd. Ow, it hurts. The faint, pained cry pierced through the sound of crumbling concrete and panicked screams. Izuku froze. His slit-pupiled eyes darted back toward the danger zone. There, trapped beneath a massive slab of debris that had fallen from a crushed building, was Uraraka. She was pinned by the legs, struggling weakly, looking up in absolute terror as the massive treads of the zero-pointer rolled inexorably toward her. No one else noticed. They were all running away. Izuku's heart stopped. If he ran, she would die. If he tried to use his human arms to lift the rubble, he wouldn't be fast enough. If he used his partial shift, he couldn't generate enough leverage to stop the robot. He needed mass. He needed absolute, overwhelming power. Izuku Midoriya stopped running away. He turned to face the mechanical titan. All Might said not to use it, Izuku's logical brain screamed. It will shatter my bones. Save her, the hero in his soul demanded. Izuku closed his eyes. He reached deep within himself, grabbing the heavy, ancient DNA of the Tyrant King with one mental hand, and the radiant, blinding sun of One for All with the other. He smashed them together. Full shift! Izuku roared. The resulting explosion of energy didn't produce green steam. It produced a shockwave that cracked the pavement for 50 yards in every direction. A blinding pillar of emerald light and crimson lightning erupted from Izuku's body, rocketing into the sky and parting the clouds above the battle center. In the observation room, the faculty flinched, shielding their eyes from the monitors. What is that energy reading? Snipe yelled, looking at the suddenly spiking dials. It's off the charts. Aizawa leaned forward, his eyes wide. The light cleared. Standing in the center of the avenue was no longer a teenage boy. It was the apex predator of the Cretaceous period, scaled up to horrifying proportions. Izuku had transformed into the 40-foot-long, 8-ton Tyrannosaurus Rex. But it was profoundly different from his encounter with the sludge villain. The raw power of One for All had forcefully mutated the beast. The dark green scales glowed from within with a pulsing, radioactive emerald light. Veins of pure, golden energy snaked across his massive thighs and broad chest. Crimson lightning violently crackled and arced off his massive teeth and talons, whipping the air into a frenzy. He wasn't just a dinosaur. He was a bioelectric super predator. The zero-pointer stopped its advance, its optical sensors trying to calculate the sudden, massive biological threat that had appeared before it. Izuku didn't give it time to calculate. He let out a roar that completely dwarfed the mechanical groans of the robot. The sonic boom of the roar shattered every remaining window in the testing center. Izuku coiled his massive, glowing legs. He channeled 100% of one for all into his theropod thighs. Boom! The street beneath him didn't just crack. It pulverized into dust. The 8-ton dinosaur launched himself into the air like a guided missile, defying every known law of physics. He cleared 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, soaring directly toward the zero-pointer's massive, camera-covered head. Uraraka, trapped beneath the rubble, watched in awe as the glowing, lightning-wreathed leviathan blotted out the sun. The zero-pointer raised its massive arm to swat the airborne dinosaur out of the sky. Izuku's golden, slit eyes locked onto the incoming arm. He unhinged his massive jaws, the crimson lightning coalescing violently around his 6-inch, serrated teeth. He lunged forward and bit down. A Tyrannosaurus Rex has a bite force of 8,000 psi. Enhanced by 100% of one for all, that force became astronomical. Izuku's jaws clamped down on the robot's thick steel forearm. The metal crumpled like wet tissue paper. With a vicious, thrashing twist of his incredibly thick neck, Izuku cleanly tore the mechanical arm off the robot, spitting the massive hunk of steel away. But he wasn't done. Using the momentum of the bite, Izuku spun his massive body in midair. He channeled the entirety of one for all's stockpiled power into his heavy, 8-foot tail. The appendage glowed so brightly green it was hard to look at. Jurassic! Izuku's internal voice roared, the sound echoing through the energy of the quirk. Smash! The tail struck the side of the zero-pointer's head. The impact sounded like a bomb detonating. The kinetic force transferred from the tail into the robot was so immense that the massive machine's internal framework instantly buckled. The zero-pointer's head caved in entirely. The shockwave rippled down its spine, blowing out its back panels in a massive shower of sparks, fire, and twisted metal. The colossal robot leaned backward, utterly annihilated by a single strike, and crashed into the foe's city behind it, creating a tidal wave of dust. Silence descended on the battle center. In the observation room, the heroes stood frozen. President Mike had dropped his microphone. Aizawa was gripping the edge of the console, his knuckles white. He destroyed it. Midnight whispered in disbelief. With a tail whip. Mid-air, the euphoria of the strike vanished, instantly replaced by sheer, blinding agony. All Might's warning proved terrifyingly accurate. The recoil of one for all at 100% was too much for even the dinosaur's dense biology to handle. Izuku heard the sickening crack before he felt it. The bones in his massive right leg, which had taken the brunt of the jump, splintered into 100 pieces. His jaw, having bitten through solid steel, dislocated and fractured under the strain. Izuku let out a gurgling, pained shriek, blood spraying from his scaly lips. Gravity reasserted its hold. The 8-ton beast began to plummet toward the concrete 200 feet below. If I land like this, I'll crush Uraraka, Izuku thought through the haze of agony. I have to shrink. He forced the quirk to deactivate. The glowing scales, the crimson lightning, the massive bulk, it all evaporated into a massive cloud of hissing green steam. Izuku emerged from the steam in his human form, free-falling, but the damage translated. His human right leg was a ruined, purple mess, flapping uselessly in the wind. His human jaw was broken, hanging slack, a line of blood trailing from his mouth. He couldn't move. He couldn't brace for the fall. I'm going to die, Izuku thought, his eyes fluttering shut. But I saved her. I got some points. Maybe it's enough. The ground rushed up to meet him. Smack! Izuku felt a sharp, stinging pain on his cheek. Suddenly, his momentum halted entirely. He stopped mere inches from the shattered pavement, floating weightlessly. He managed to pry his good eye open. Uraraka had dragged herself out from under the rubble. She was leaning over, her hand outstretched, having slapped him in the face to activate her zero-gravity quirk just before he hit the ground. End release. Uraraka gasped, pressing her fingers together. Izuku dropped the remaining 3 inches, groaning as his broken body rested on the pavement. Uraraka immediately turned away, her face pale, and vomited a rainbow of glitter onto the asphalt, the strain of overusing her quirk finally taking its toll. "Time's up!" President Mick's voice blared over the speakers, echoing through the ruined city. The exam was over. Izuku lay on his back, staring up at the sky. He couldn't feel his leg. His jaw throbbed with a white-hot intensity. He tried to speak, to ask Uraraka if she was okay, but all that came out was a soft, bloody wheeze. The other applicants slowly began to emerge from the alleyways, walking past the wreckage of the zero-pointer. They stared at Izuku, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and absolute awe. Did he do that? He turned into a dinosaur, a giant, glowing dinosaur. He's a monster, but he saved that girl. Katsuki Bakugo walked out of the dust, his tracksuit singed. He stared at the decapitated remains of the zero-pointer, then down at Izuku's broken, bleeding body. Katsuki's fists clenched so hard his palms bled. His expression wasn't angry. It was a look of profound, paradigm-shattering shock. Very good, very good. Excellent work, everyone. A small, elderly woman dressed in a nurse's outfit hobbled through the crowd, using a massive syringe as a walking cane. It was Recovery Girl, the backbone of Yue High School. She walked up to Izuku, looking down at his mangled leg and broken jaw. She let out a long, exasperated sigh. "What in the world did you do, boy?" she scolded, though her eyes held a glimmer of sympathy. "Your bones aren't just broken. They look like they were put in a blender. Did you get hit by the robot?" Izuku shook his head weakly, gesturing vaguely to his own leg. "He did it to himself," Uraraka croaked, wiping her mouth. "He jumped, and he hit the robot so hard he broke his own body." Recovery Girl's eyebrows shot up. She looked at the zero-pointer, then back to the scrawny boy on the ground. She puckered her lips, planting a wet kiss directly on Izuku's forehead. Instantly Izuku felt a massive surge of his body's natural stamina go to work. The bones in his leg audibly snapped back into place, the deep purple bruising fading to a dull yellow. His jaw locked back into its hinges. But the rapid healing completely depleted his remaining energy reserves. His vision went dark. The last thing he heard before slipping into unconsciousness was the sound of Recovery Girl scolding the sky. "Tashinori, you absolute fool! What kind of power did you give this child?" Izuku let the darkness take him. He had done it. He had unleashed the beast, he had wielded the power of a god, and he had saved a life. Now, all he could do was wait for the mail.